comparing current NBA players to all-time NBA greats. Most of today's players have created their own totally unique style, especially with how much the game's developed over the years. And a lot of comparisons were hard to make because of that, but we made our best effort. What we're focusing on today is comparing today's current players' play styles to players of the past to see if we can find direct matches. We're not focusing on personalities or looks or anything, just how they play on the court. And since no two players play exactly alike, we're aiming to use between 2 and 3 former players for each comparison. We also want to try to stay away from using current players to describe other current players' styles, but in some cases it can't be avoided, especially for the newer guys, and you'll understand more as the video goes on. The first one though goes to Luka Dončić, whose comparison is a combination of Larry Bird, LeBron James, and James Harden. The man's a 6'7" small forward that has all the playmaking and triple-double ability of LeBron, with similar scoring tactics as Larry Bird, and is able to hit step-backs at times and get to the rim in a similar manner to James Harden, and I think it's a pretty accurate comparison for him. Comparing him to 3 all-time greats though is really saying something, but it makes sense. Blake Griffin's draft day comparison coming into the league was Karl Malone and Antonio McDyess, and that's part of what we're sticking with. And you might not be too familiar with McDyess because he was a role player for most of the second half of his career, but he really does play just like Blake does around the rim. And I tried not to use too many unpopular names like this one from the 90s, but with how exact this one was, it had to be mentioned. And the Karl Malone comparison comes in because of how well they both executed the pick and roll. I also want to throw Kevin Garnett into this one though, because Blake's really expanded his game to mid-range and threes over the past few years, and KG was the guy that started to do the same as his career went on. The best comparison I could find for Devin Booker was simply 2 current players in Gordon Hayward and Klay Thompson. And this was also his draft day comparison coming into the NBA. On offense, I think his game really does look similar to Gordon's, except just a much better version of it. And he shoots a lot more, which is where the Thompson comparison comes in. Sure, he doesn't have his defense or anything, but I'd say it's still pretty accurate, especially because Booker was a hard comparison to find. I would also throw in Brandon Roy in here too though, as the single player that's game most resembles Devin's with the way they made scoring look so smooth. Then there's no question that LeBron James definitely resembles Magic Johnson, and that's been the comparison throughout his entire career with his size, how well his all-around game is, and his passing ability. And considering how much more athletic James is, and how much better he's been on offense his entire career, I knew another player had to be in this comparison. I thought about Michael Jordan for a minute, but nothing about them really relates, other than the matter of their dominance. But that's not really in their play style. So instead, I think Julius Erving's a great fit here. He was very athletic on both ends, and had several seasons where he scored between 27 and 30 points a game. Then the only players you could use for a Russell Westbrook comparison had to be a prime Derrick Rose to go along with Oscar Robertson. The man's got all the athleticism of the Bulls D Rose, and the all-around game and defense that Oscar had. I was gonna use Rajon Rondo instead of Oscar because of those 2 reasons, but Rondo's a much better pure passer than Russ has ever been. Plus Oscar's a better fit anyways because of how well he scored and averaged triple doubles for multiple seasons. James Harden directly compares to both Paul Pierce and Manu Ginobili. And this one might not seem too accurate right off the bat, but I think it's definitely the best comparison. First off, nobody draws fouls or can blow past defenders as good as James can, but Paul Pierce was a guy that utilized stepbacks and wasn't the most athletic player, but still always found ways to score. And that's very similar to James. Harden's definitely more athletic than Pierce was, but he rarely uses it to score. And as for Ginobili, that was one of Harden's favorite players growing up, and he's even said that he modeled most of his game after him. They're both left-handed, used the Euro step, were a 6-man at one point, and were great at driving to the basket and maneuvering around other players to get the open shot. Then for Steph Curry, Steve Nash was considered here, but a much better comparison I would say has to be Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and Reggie Miller. If you go back and watch highlights, Rauf and Steph are very similar players, with the way they made plays off of picks, pulled up in a second from deep, and were able to score around the rim. Steph's just a much better version of it. And then you combine that with the 3-making ability of Reggie Miller to go along with how well he used to run around the court all game long, using screens and picks to get open. And I think this makes for the perfect Steph Curry comparison. Then a great comparison for Kevin Durant is that he's a cross between Dirk Nowitzki and Tracy McGrady. He's got the size and shooting ability of Dirk, while at the same time having the athleticism and style of T-Mac. During Tracy's prime, he was the best scorer in the league and had the ability to score on you from anywhere. but he would often choose to take a lot of shots from 3 and mid-range. And that's exactly how Kevin Durant plays. He'll shoot all day long, and once you start overplaying him, he'll attack the rim. For Ben Simmons, I really don't have a comparison. He was compared to LeBron James and Lamar Odom coming into the league, and maybe he'd make one of those cases a little better if he played small forward, but as a point guard, the only thing we can do is call him a poor man's Magic Johnson. I don't even want to compare him to Magic, but I got no choice. There's no one else even similar. All I know is that at this point, everything about how Ben Simmons plays is just starting to get annoying, especially with all the hype he had around him. For Joel Embiid, we're also sticking with his draft day comparison of Hakeem Olajuwon and Tim Duncan. And it's very easy to see where the Hakeem part comes in, and his footwork and ability to get great shots off over defenders in the paint are the reasons why. And even though he had one of the latest starts at the sport of basketball, he has the best post fundamentals in the league, which he shares in common with Tim Duncan, aka the big fundamental. And that, along with his defense, is why Tim is included here. But his effort, shot selection at times, and turnovers are all things he does still need work on. Jimmy Butler really plays like a combo of Ron Artest and Paul George. And Jimmy was a tough one because he's got a strange and unique style that we really haven't seen from too many other players. So I would say he's got the rugged, aggressive defense similar to what Ron Artest had, and a similar but not as good offensive game as PG-13. And I hate comparing two current stars that are about the same age for the video, but there wasn't really many other options for Butler. For Kemba Walker though, I think comparing him to Tim Hardaway and Kevin Johnson is pretty accurate, because he's definitely got the crossover ability of Hardaway and is able to blow past defenders, but he's also got the all-around game of Johnson, where he doesn't necessarily do anything too flashy and doesn't excel in any one category, but he's consistently a great all-around point guard. And he's already had a better career than Johnson, and if he keeps things up, he'll definitely eclipse Hardaway too. Kyrie Irving's another star player in the league, and as tough as it was, there was honestly no accurate comparison I could find for him. NBADraft.net had his comparison as Mike Conley and Chris Paul coming into the league, which would make sense, but he's not a leader or a team player like CP3, and he's much better on offense than Mike Conley. Plus, no one's handles even compared to his, so I just couldn't find one for him. If you do have one though, comment it and let me know. A comparison for Anthony Davis would have to be a crossover between Kevin Garnett, David Robinson, and Kareem. And I will say it was tough to compare him to anyone because he's easily the most diverse power forward the game has ever seen. So it took 3 all-time players to really compare him to, with only one of them being a true power forward in Kevin Garnett. And that's because of his inside and out game and his defense. He also compares to David Robinson for his ability in the low post and how he can dominate on both ends every night. But then he's light on his feet and runs the floor as good as Kareem did back in his prime, as well as having good footwork and post moves down low. It was a tough one, but I feel like that's how we came up with the most accurate comparison for Anthony Davis. Kristaps Porzingis, on the other hand, was an easy one because he mostly resembles a combination of Dirk Nowitzki and Sean Bradley for obvious reasons. Dirk because he's a 7-foot overseas perimeter player that doesn't post up too much and usually shoots threes and mid-range shots. And Sean Bradley because Kristaps is actually 7'3" and is also a great shot blocker, which gives him a great blend of offense and post defense. A combination Nowitzki didn't really have during his career. For Nikola Jokic, his comparison would be Tim Duncan and Pau Gasol. And Jokic has had a slow start to the season, but overall as a player, he's a guy we've never really seen anything like. A center that plays like his team's point guard and does a great job at it. He's a triple-double machine and seems to facilitate the offense as a big man. Again, he's not a great athlete, which is where the Tim Duncan part comes in. And Pau Gasol also was never a great athlete, but one of the better passing big men we've seen throughout league history. So while this isn't a perfect comparison for Jokic, it was the best one I came up with. Then DeMar DeRozan is a blend between Vince Carter and Clyde Drexler. He may not be as talented as either man, but they honestly do have similar styles. DeRozan and Vince both used to be top tier dunkers, and in terms of scoring ability, there's a lot he has in common with Clyde. Surprisingly though, both guys were overall much better 3-point shooters than DeMar. His teammate LaMarcus Aldridge compares almost perfectly to Tim Duncan and Kevin McHale. Aldridge plays under the rim, rebounds and has fadeaways like Duncan, has a lot of post moves similar to McHale, and if you combine both of these guys, I think you would definitely end up with a player that plays a lot like LaMarcus Aldridge. Then I couldn't use any past players to compare them to De'Aaron Fox, because De'Aaron's young and a product of the newer NBA style. His draft day comparison though was John Wall and Dennis Schroeder, and that makes perfect sense even today. He's got the speed and flashiness that Wall had, while having a playstyle that matches Schroeder's. To really make a full comparison though, I think it'd make the most sense to throw Mike Conley in there too. I can't really put my finger on what gives these two the same feel, but it's definitely something. It looks like that's gonna wrap up things for the video. I got a ton more players to compare to all-time NBA legends, but seeing how long the first half of them took, I thought it'd be perfect to break them up into 2 parts. This video was a little different than usual, so if you do want to see a part 2, drop a like and comment and let me know if I should make it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.